Now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Mr. Robert Tuman. Mr. Tuman is the president of CCR Safety Consulting. He provides an array of risk management and safety and accident prevention and training services to construction, manufacturing, and general industry companies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Tuman.
Good morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock now in sunny California. And I want to thank the association, Jessica, and you for participating in today's webinar. The title of today's webinar is Contractors: How to Motivate Workers' Compensation Insurers to Compete for Your Business, especially during renewal time. I wrote this ebook to help contractors get a leg up when buying or renewing workers' comp insurance. I've spent my 42-year professional life helping contractors in every trade from all the way ground up to protect their employees against injury and illness. This took me to thousands of job sites, thousands of safety meetings, thousands of safety training sessions, and hundreds of workers' comp claims, helping my 300 plus contractor clients manage these costly claims. Additionally, I represented clients at OSHA hearings. Fortunately, probably less than 15 of those. In addition to working directly with contractors, I was pleased when I was invited by workers' compensation insurance companies to conduct loss control surveys. Essentially, these are, and I'm sure many of you have had loss control surveys, so you're probably aware of what they are, but they're essentially surveys of policyholders' operations, safety programs, and practices. So I was the guy that called you one morning and said, "Hi, I'm Bob Tuman. I'm the loss control consultant for ... insurance company. And I've been asked by the underwriter to schedule a loss control survey with you and a job site visit." Today, I'm going to wear the loss control surveyor hat to share ideas with you which will help you to increase the probability of a smooth and successful workers' comp insurance purchase or insurance renewal. We're going to use the standard workers' compensation supplemental application that I'm sure you've filled out many times over the years. Before we get into the main part of the webinar, I just would like to share a few words before we get into the main part of the webinar. One is, it's not a perfect world and you're not expected to achieve perfection. However, the more you do when it comes to safety, the higher the probability of enjoying favorable loss experience. Document, and archive. Whatever you do, document as much as possible that's related to safety. For example, if you bring a notebook or a tablet or a phone onto job sites, document unsafe conditions, if any, and unsafe behavior, and what you did to correct. Your safety practices should be laser focused on your injury and illness risks and exposure. So for example, if you're a roofing contractor, obviously falls are a major exposure for you. So you need to have a fall protection program and fall protection training. If you're an excavating contractor, excavating and trenching contractor, then your major exposure is trench cave-ins. So you need to have your people trained in excavation safety. If you're an electrical contractor, your concerns are electrical shock and arc flash and arc blast protection, the major issue in electrical safety today. And if your exposures are struck bys, caught in betweens, back injuries, from heavy lifting, silica inhalation, burns, cuts, etc., then you need to focus on that as your exposures. So let's get into the main part of the webinar. And again, please hold your questions until the end. Jessica is going to take your questions in the chat box and read them to me, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. And if you have a question after this webinar, I can be reached at Bob Tuman, BOBTUMAN, @gmail.com. If you have a simple question or a simple matter, please feel free to contact me. I'm not going to charge you for giving you advice on a simple matter. So sit back, pretend that you and I are at your job site for the loss control survey. So the supplemental application, the first part that it covers is hiring practices, employee selection, new employee safety training, and subcontractors. So I'm going to ask you, where do you find your employees? Are you advertising on Craigslist? Are you hiring off the street? Are you hiring from a labor service? Or do you ask your employees or perhaps suppliers or friendly competitors if they have anyone who's interested in a job? I can tell you unequivocally, over the 42 years I've been working with, at this point, close to 1,000 contractors, that the best way to hire is word of mouth from current employees or suppliers. Are you providing job-specific training? So a lot of my clients set up little shops, and they bring someone who is applying for a job in and have them use the company equipment, a jackhammer, a drill, a forklift, or whatever, to make sure that if they said they had experience doing that type of work, that they were in fact competent to use that equipment and to do those tasks. Are you providing a new hire safety orientation and safety training? At the very least, do you have a code of safe practices or a list of safe practices? Are you reviewing them with employees and having the employees or new hires and current employees and having them sign off and date it that they've participated and completed that training? Are you using subcontractors? Are you getting their certificates of insurance? It's been my experience, especially again, wearing the loss control consultant hat, that a lot of contractors tell their subcontractors, and by the way, once you subcontract work out, unless your contract says that basically you have no relationship whatsoever to that subcontractor, you're considered the general contractor. If your subcontractor doesn't have insurance, and has an injury that becomes a workers' compensation claim, you're on the hook for that claim. And let me give you one example. I had a excavation and trenching contractor that got very busy, and they just didn't have enough manpower and equipment, and so they subcontracted work out to another excavation and trenching contractor. They didn't bother to get a certificate of insurance. And the second week that the operator was on one of their jobs, he flipped the machine, and the machine landed on the guy's legs, the operator's legs, causing compound fracture of both legs. The claim initially was approaching $200,000 and went up to $500,000. And the free care pool went looking for workers' compensation. Well, they went looking for workers' compensation and found that this subcontractor, this excavation and trenching contractor, did not did not have workers' compensation insurance. At that point, the free care pool in that particular state, this happened to be Massachusetts, took over the care, paid for the care and the rehabilitation of this severely injured employee worker. But then they went to my client and shifted the claim and all the costs associated with this injury on my client. My client's workers' compensation tripled, premium tripled, and their experience modification was approaching 2.0, which is twice, they were paying twice the amount that they should have been paid given their industry. So it's critically important that you get the certificate of insurance from the subcontractor's agent prior to that person stepping on one of your job sites. The second part of the supplemental application deals with safety program and organization. So I'm going to ask and answer, are you involved in daily operations? Yes, I'm the owner and I'm involved in daily operations. I go to job sites. I bring my tablet, my phone, and a notebook. I'm looking at production. I'm supervising employees. Sometimes I'm there all day. I'm taking photos. And I'm looking for unsafe behavior and unsafe conditions, and I'm going to correct it as I see it. If the underwriter sees that you're not involved in daily operations, you're not at least monitoring safety, being a participant in the development and implementation and execution of your safety programs, basically it's a minus. Do you have an active injury and illness prevention program? In the state of California, every employer over, I believe, 10 employees is required to have an injury and illness prevention program. The Cal OSHA website has a writable, customizable injury and illness prevention program. It is somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 pages. And the question is whether anyone really reads this document. I've seen a lot of beautiful, beautiful paper in my 42 years. Some contractors executing their safety programs and field safety practices. And some just saying, I have this safety manual essentially, and that suffices for us. Well, let me make a recommendation to you. I think you're better off with that 1 to 3 or 4 or 5 page list of a code of safe practices. Just make a list of all the ways that your employees can get injured. Let's say you're a roofing contractor. Of course, the major issue is falls. Excavation contractor, major issue is excavation and trench cave-ins. So make a list of all the ways that your employees could get hurt, and then have safety recommendations for each one of these exposures. Do you have an early return to work program, a proactive early return to work program? So at this point in my life, I've worked on hundreds and hundreds of workers' compensation claims. And most of the contractors and other employers I've worked with look to the treating doctor for helping to return the injured employee to work. So let's say you have an employee who lifted something one day and pulled his back out or her back out. What are you going to do? First of all, that person's going to be feeling very insecure and wondering whether they have a job to come back to. And so as soon as possible after that injury, you want to contact that person. And usually you want to get an individual who that person has worked with and trusted to contact that person and perhaps visit with them, meet them for lunch or coffee or whatever, and assure them that they have that their job is secure, and that you want to try to get them back to work as soon as possible. Then you want to proceed to develop a modified duty job for that person. You can gauge the return to work date based on what the doctor tells you, but you want to contact that doctor and send that doctor a job description of that modified duty job so they fully understand. It should be in physical terms as well, to help that doctor understand the modified duty work that you have proposed, and to get that doctor's cooperation in helping you return that individual to work. And let's say the modified duty job, let's say the doctor says the person can't do the modified duty. You want to try to modify that even a little bit further to get the doctor's cooperation to return that individual to work. And if in fact that second modified duty job description doesn't suffice, you want to track that, continue to monitor the progress to base level of that employee's return to base level functioning, and jump in periodically to contact the treating doctor to try to get his or her cooperation for your return to work program. Because you know what, when people are out on a workers' compensation claim, it's a pretty lonely existence. And adjusters are kind of, the insurance adjusters will be ordering after a certain time, if someone doesn't return to work, the adjusters are going to be ordering surveillance. And the employee, if they see if they see the surveillance, they're going to get very concerned. The first thing they may do is to hire an attorney. Once an attorney is involved, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to get that person back to work. So to make a long story short, you want to take a proactive early return to work approach rather than waiting on the person to get better and return to their full duty work. The other thing that you should consider is when the adjuster, the insurance adjuster, that claims adjuster, doesn't see an end in sight to that workers' compensation claims, they're compelled to put additional reserves on that case. That's basically in a bank account that's not spent until services are required. And those reserves, and I'll give you an example in a minute, those reserves go against you on your experience modification rate. Many of you know what an experience modification rate is. If you don't, I'll explain it to you at the very end. But those reserves are put in just like that money has already been spent and could have a dramatic adverse impact on your on your experience modification rate and flowing through into higher premiums. So let me give you an example. I had a client that installed smoke eaters, and these were put in restaurants when smoking was pretty prevalent in restaurants, and they would exhaust the cigarette smoke. And one Saturday night, one of their larger customers called and said, "The smoke eater has stopped working. Can you send someone over?" And the owner sent his brother over to repair the smoke heater. And on the way back home, the brother got into a head-on collision and died. The insurance company, they denied the claim. Really quite unfortunate, leaving the guy's wife and children basically without any money. They put a $250,000 reserve on that claim, causing, and it wasn't spent until it went to court, and the judge ordered the insurance company to start paying the widow and children. And that $250,000 reserve, just alone, tripled my client's premium in the following 3 years. So that's how a reserve can hurt you. So again, you want to bond with that injured worker as soon as possible. And I always advise my clients to kill the injured worker with kindness. And that seemed to work out. Has OSHA visited or cited your business in the past year? If they have, or in the past 3 years, generally the insurance underwriters look at a 3-year history of OSHA visits or citations. So let me tell you, and if you want, after this webinar, if you want to take a look, please do. OSHA citations are public. If you go on osha.gov, and in the search box in the upper right-hand corner, enter establishment search, a whole bunch of fields will come up, and you can put in the legal name of the contractor or employer, the date range, and click on submit, and all of the OSHA citations for that particular employer will come up. And by the way, if they haven't had any, it'll say no results found. So if you've had an OSHA citation, even one where you're exonerated, then preempt the underwriter or the loss control consultant's search for your OSHA citations. And like with OSHA, underwriters want to know, they want to be able to see what happened that prompted OSHA to fine you. But they're really most important in what you've done after that citation to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So you want to put your best foot forward. You want to say, okay, we had a citation, we had a fall. The individual, we had a monitor up on that roof, but the monitor wasn't really monitoring. And the guy fell and he hurt himself pretty badly. And OSHA came out. The EMTs, usually emergency medical technicians, will report accidents to OSHA. And but here's what we did. Instead of safety monitors up on roofs now, we're using weighted guardrail. We're erecting static lines. We're having everyone harnessed and clipped off. We're building guardrail, or we're hiring an outside safety consultant to monitor work on roofs. So again, they don't care, they're obviously going to be concerned about what happened, but they're going to be much more concerned about what you did after. Do you have a safety director or safety officer or a risk manager? Okay. So I've asked this question multiple times. Very often the safety officer for the company was with the owner when we were on a job site doing the loss control survey. I'd want to know what that safety officer is doing. How much time are you spending on safety? Have you had an OSHA construction safety training program? Have you completed an OSHA construction safety training program? Are you involved with day-to-day operations? How often are you on job sites? How are you documenting unsafe behavior and unsafe conditions? What are you doing to correct unsafe behavior or unsafe conditions? How are you following up to make sure that the foreman and employees have executed after you've cited them for a safety violation? Are you issuing written safety violation notices to put the foreman on notice that she or he has to correct immediately if they see an unsafe behavior or unsafe conditions? Very often I'm finding safety officers in name only. They don't go to job sites. They just, occasionally when there's a question about a safety issue, they might look up the OSHA standard and share it with the foreman. I want to see a safety officer, director, or risk manager, part-time or full-time, do their job. That is, go to job sites and inspect. If corrective actions need to be done, make sure they're done. Follow up to make sure they're executing. Go back again to make sure that they're executing, and really do the job that I would do if I was the safety consultant for that company. Do employees receive safety training and orientation? You might ask what I'm doing now. I prefer semi-working. I'm only working maybe versus the old days when I was working 14-hour days. I'm only working maybe half a day a month. I have one large electrical contractor client here on the Central Coast of California. We make sure that every new hire goes through the better part of a day's safety training, safety orientation on personal protective equipment, electrical safety, trench safety, because we're working in trenches, fall protection. We get them to, we have a 5-page code of safe practices. We get them to read it. We go over each safety practice, and at the very end, they sign and date the code of safe practices. So again, just alluding back to my previous statement, I prefer, instead of having these huge documents, 50, 75 pages that no one's ever going to read, that you have anywhere between a 1 and whatever 5. We have 5 pages code of safe practices that we use during training and orientation. In addition, for this electrical contractor, I'm doing monthly inspections, safety training, and advising them on any issue that comes up, including we've had one OSHA citation for which we were completely exonerated. Okay. Any lifting exposures? I did a study of workers' compensation claims that occur throughout the country, and by and large, the most costly of them all, right now, the most costly injury-related workers' compensation claim is a fall, either resulted in spinal cord injury or bad injury, multiple compound fractures, or death, was falls. Right. Very close second is back injuries, back and leg and knee and musculoskeletal injuries. So what are your employees lifting, and what do they weigh? So on one of my loss control surveys, with it was a stucco contractor. I looked up what a 4x8 sheet of drywall weighed. This was not reinforced drywall. And it weighs roughly, I think 44 pounds is what I found. And I asked the foreman, how many times a day are you guys lifting? And I happen to see, by the way, that they were lifting the sheets of drywall by themselves. Sometimes buddy lifting, sometimes by themselves. Most of the time by themselves. How many times a day are you guys lifting and carrying and placing these sheets of drywall? And he said, well, probably, I don't know, 25, 30 times a day, 40 times a day. So I went back and I added it up. And I think I got some crazy number. If they're working 50 days, 50 weeks a year, it added up to like 220,000 pounds that one individual is lifting, carrying, and placing these 44-pound sheets of drywall. The underwriter is going to say, come on, if you continue this, these guys, they're going to wear their backs out. And we're going to get these chronic, long-term back injuries that are going to be very expensive to both you and I. So you got to explain. So basically, you've got to use as much lifting equipment as possible. If you have a rough terrain forklift out there, or hoists, or other ways of lifting, or buddy lifting, or multiple person lifting, you got to tell the underwriter that's what you're doing to minimize the probability of costly back injuries. Have you provided forklift training? You may know that OSHA, this is one of nationwide. This is one of the trainings that's required. So you can answer it as following. Yes, I provide forklift training. It's called powered industrial truck training. We have a warehouse forklift, and we also have, we rent from United Rentals. We're renting rough terrain forklifts, or in the East Coast, they call them lulls. And, and we're making sure that everyone's trained who is or might be operating a forklift. And you know what? Instead of waiting for that 3 years to pass, where retraining is required, we're doing that training annually so we don't miss anyone. And because OSHA says if we see someone operating a forklift unsafely, we got to retrain that person. We're retraining that person. And there have been many instances where we've seen forklift operators drive very fast. And we've stopped that person. We've suspended them for a while from operating a forklift, and we've brought them in and we've retrained them. Do you have a written lockout, tagout, blockout procedure in place? Are you doing NFPA 70E training? Okay. I've surveyed a lot of electrical contractors, and it just surprises me when people say, well, we can't really lock out and tag out. We can't control hazardous energy. It's control of hazardous energy, OSHA standard. We can't really lock out and tag out because we have to troubleshoot. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure, if someone can get zapped pretty badly if they do the wrong thing during troubleshooting. And so whenever possible, I'm going to recommend that they both train all their people on lockout, tagout, or control of hazardous energy, and make sure that it's used, that they execute. NFPA is called National Fire Protection Association. Basically, it's arc flash, arc blast protection. And involved in that is to prevent, try to, do whatever you can to prevent people from from being exposed to an arc flash or an arc blast, which can be fatal. They say that if a panel blows up or if it arcs, the temperature is very close to the surface of the sun, and I can believe it. So you want to make sure that if you're an electrical contractor, that you do your NFPA 70E training. It's half a day to a day's worth of training. You have to purchase or rent. Basically, you want to purchase the arc flash suits. You want to have people inspect the suits. You only want to have journeymen do the activation of the service. You want to limit the amount of people in the electrical room when they're activating the service. You want to have them blow up the gloves before they do activate the service to make sure there's no pinholes through which electrical current can go. And I have an illustration of what can happen, actually a good outcome, when an electrical contractor has trained all their people in arc flash and arc blast protection. We had a neighborhood party one time, and a neighbor of mine named Tom, who was a journeyman for the largest electrical contractor on the East Coast. They had 650 electricians and worked all over the East Coast from Maine to Florida. And so he walked into the neighborhood party, and everyone greeted him with Sparky. And so after I pulled Tom aside, and I said, Tom, what's this Sparky stuff? What's going on? And he said he was replacing the panel in a 50-year-old school. And he inserted a tool into the panel, and the panel blew up. He was thrust back against the concrete wall. Fortunately for him, and when I'd walk past his house every day on my after work walk around the block, I'd see his 3 kids were playing on the front lawn. They were under the age of 10. Luckily for him, his employer had done the NFPA 70E training just a month before and outfitted everyone who was activating services with or working on old services with the arc flash or calorie rated suits, the gloves, balaclavas, and basically a non-conductive material. Saved his life. Had he not been wearing that suit, he would have been dead, leaving 3 young kids. Do you have a respiratory protection program in place? OSHA now is huge on silica inhalation, silica exposure, silica insulation, silica exposure, excuse me. If you're drilling, you're coring, you're sanding concrete, you're generating silica. If you're cutting into a drywall, you're generating silica. Silicosis is very much like asbestosis. It shortens lives. The underwriters are going to want to see if your description of the work you do involves any exposure to airborne silica, that you have a respiratory protection program in place. That includes medical examinations for anyone wearing a respirator or exposed to, anyone wearing a respirator. The respirator could be a half-face respirator, a full-face respirator. an airline respirator, or a self-contained breathing apparatus, just like the firefighters use when they go into a fire, when they go into a burning structure. They're going to want to see that you have trained people in the care and maintenance of their respirators. Are they getting cleaned? Are the filters getting cleaned? I had a client that put the filters and the respirator in the dishwasher at the end of every day. And that did a good job. Kind of unorthodox, but it did a good job of cleaning the respirators. Are the filters filtering out what you want them to filter? Dust, fumes, etc. Have you trained people? Have you made sure that your respirator wearers are clean shaven before they put the respirator on? Because you know what? It's really not like having a respirator on if you have a beard or if you have a multiple day growth of hair, because the seal is broken. Are they doing a seal test when they first put the respirator on? Positive and negative seals. So in any case, very important to have a respiratory protection program. If the work that's being done is exposing the employee to dust, fumes, silica, of course, asbestos if they're doing any abatement, asbestos abatement or lead abatement or whatever, or mold abatement. And are they medically able to wear that respirator? Do they have asthma? Do they have chronic obstructive lung disease? So they get employees with pre-existing conditions like that are limiting their respiratory function are going to be disqualified from wearing respirators. What's the maximum height at which you're going to work, or which you do work? Okay. So I've seen a lot of supplemental applications that say 10 feet, 12 feet. Then I go to a job, I go to a job site and I see someone's up on a 20-foot ladder and they're doing, let's say it's the framer, or they're up on swing scaffolding or 3-point scaffolding or pipe scaffolding up 24, 30 feet. Be accurate when you're answering that question. As a matter of fact, be accurate when you're answering all the questions. If you're working at 20 feet, if on any particular job, you're working on a height that is generally not more than the average that you're working on, then make sure you say that. And make sure you tell the loss control surveyor, who's going to tell the underwriter, what you're doing to protect people from falling. Are you providing personal protective equipment? Okay. Most of the contractors that I worked with directly, that is not through loss control surveys, have a list of the required personal protective equipment. They review that during the safety orientation and have people sign off on it. And currently my electrical contractor client requires the following on all jobs, at all times when they're in a building under construction, and only if they're outside and they're on break, they don't have to wear their hard hat, but a hard hat, safety glasses with side shields, high visibility class 2 high visibility vests. And there are 3 classes of vests. One is for when you're exposed to equipment operating at less than 25 miles per hour. The next one up, which this electrical contractor is requiring, is when equipment is moving between 25 and 50 miles an hour on a job site. And then the highest class is what you'll see on the highways that the workers who are working at night or the policemen who are working on the highway are wearing, and that's for equipment and vehicles, et cetera, that are moving more than 50 miles an hour. Are using cranes, booms, or aerial lifts, similar heavy construction equipment. Okay, when I saw a crane on site, I went up to the crane operator and I said, "Can you show me a license?" And I looked to make sure they had been trained within the last year, that their training was renewed within the last year. I also asked for the crane inspection. I'd want to make sure that was done in the last year. And in Massachusetts, where I did most of my work, there were only 2 competent crane inspectors who did basically all day or sometimes 2-day crane inspections. So you want to make sure that whoever did the crane inspection is experienced, trained, and competent. And let me give you an example of what can happen when a crane isn't inspected. I had a signed crane contractor. They failed to inspect the cranes, or one particular crane, over a 2-year period. Well, after 2 years, guys up in the work platform, the bucket, and he's up. The crane boom is fully extended, and all of a sudden he hears a snap, and the cable snapped. He went down. He was fully extended. I think I remember he went down 20 feet in the bucket. Was badly hurt. And what happened was they had left that crane in the yard thinking that they weren't going to use it. Massachusetts, you have snow and rain and freezing and thawing, and the the cables from the outside look fine, but they had rusted from the inside, which is something that a competent, experienced, trained crane inspector would catch. And lesson learned. Any work below grade. Okay, you should know that there's a national emphasis for those of you that I'm talking to that are excavation and trenching contractors. You should know that there's a national emphasis program that OSHA has on crane safety, and it's after they implemented this, or promulgated this, looking at all the accidents that occurred, finding that trench cave-ins were the major accidents. In some cases, workers getting buried and staggering out of the, they get buried, they get dug out, but they've been in a cave-in for a long, for several hours, where their internal organs were squeezed by the amount of pressure exerted on them by the dirt. And here in California, it's a particular issue because a lot of the dirt is clay, and it's very heavy, especially after weather events like rainstorms. So this national emphasis program says the following: if an OSHA inspector drives by your site and they see an excavator, or they see the top of a guy's hard hat in a trench, it's not that they can elect to stop and inspect. They are compelled to stop and inspect. Correct? Get the guy out of the trench if it's not protected, if it's not supported, and then cite you. If you cite it the first time, it's labeled serious, and the fines now are up to $12,500. A repeat violation, same violation, can cost you as much as $70,000. And a repeat and willful, which means basically you did it again, you knew that you were exposing your employees to a cave-in. Those citations, those fines start at $124,999, basically $125,000. So that could cut into your profit margin. So lesson learned, make sure you do whatever you can to support any trench that's deeper than 4 feet. I know most people focus on the 5-foot OSHA standard, but really 4 feet if the soil is unstable. And I've seen trenches where it's right after a rainstorm, and it's just 3 feet deep, and water's coming in from the bottom and the sides, which means that increases the likelihood of a trench cave-in. So you'd want to support that trench as well. So when in doubt, get a trench box or some means of supporting that trench against cave-in. And by the way, if OSHA goes onto your job and the employees aren't in that trench, that's unsafe trench, but they see footprints, they're going to ask you if your employees were in there. And of course, if they were, and you say yes, they were in there, you're going to get cited. Any confined space exposure. Okay, there's a particular issue to underwriters because of so many folks dying or being disabled from lack of oxygen in confined spaces. So if you have a confined space entry exposure, that is, your employees are going into vaults, or they're going 20 feet down in the ground to build a retention wall, or they're working in pressure vessels, or they're working in any confined space. And a confined space is defined as not meant for human habitation, limited means of entry and exit, and contains or could contain hazards. That is, electrical hazards, fumes, dust, mold, biological hazards. Then you need to follow the confined space standard. It's easy. And by the way, a manhole essentially is the perfect definition, is a perfect example of a confined space. So OSHA started that confined space standard, or they promulgated that confined space standard, not for the person in the confined space that may have been exposed to oxygen deficiency, but for the rescuer. Because if you've ever rescued, if you've ever heard of any rescue, it happens very quickly. And the rescuer is bolting down into that confined space or manhole, let's say, call it a manhole. And if there's no tripod or there's no way of extracting that worker in the manhole from that manhole, that rescuer is going to have to throw the guy over his shoulders and climb up the ladder. And what happened in the past, which basically triggered OSHA developing this confined space standard, was that the rescuer would have a heart attack or a stroke. Okay. Lastly, I want to go over tips on what you can do if you've had claims, if your workers' comp, if your experience modification rate is higher than you'd like, and if you've been asked to submit your experience modification rate and answer a whole lot of questions about your safety program, and the general contractor or the owner has said, your mod's too high. We're only considering subcontractors who have a mod of 1.0, no more than, let's say, 1.05. I had a concrete contractor client that lost a $20 million, it was a $10 million contract because their mod was 1.17 and the cutoff point was 1.0. And the owner, which was a public project, was a large school, was being built ground up, said, if any contractor, including the general contractor, their experience modification rate is above 1.05, they can't even throw their hat in the ring. Okay. What can you do to demonstrate to insurers that you're a good risk if you've had an unfavorable loss history? Well, I think you can go back to everything that we've gone over today and produce written programs with your employee signatures and date that that you went over the program and field safety practice with them, and submit those to your insurance agent. And the insurance agent is going to send them to whatever insurance companies they're approaching to write your workers' compensation, or to your current workers' comp carrier who has some doubts about whether you're a good risk because you've had some claims, and prove to them, submit the documentation to them to be able to prove to the insurer that you're a good risk, you're a worthwhile risk. Let me give you an example and if you've had any claims where the accident or injury was really not your fault, and I'll just go over one example in a minute, then make sure you explain to your agent and also to the insurance company what happened. And in the case of an accident where you might have been you could have done something different to prevent it or to minimize that accident, then explain it send a letter. Make sure you send a written description. Okay, so let me give you an example of what happened. I had this large concrete contractor that was doing a pour for a new building on the grounds of a prestigious prep school outside of Boston. One of their foremen was going over to they set up some outdoor benches, and the foreman was going over to the bench with his cooler to go on break. And he's walking over there, and the prep schools, one of the prep schools facilities guys was driving a golf cart, and for whatever reason, he hit the foreman and ran over him, resulting in terrible injuries. And they had signed, unfortunately, they had signed basically a contract that said they won't sue they can't sue the general contractor or the owner for any acts that caused their employees to be injured. They were really stuck, especially, and their insurance company said, "What's going on here?" Well, what they did was to write a long letter describing exactly what happened and saying that it wasn't their fault, and they were stuck with this claim. Because what happens is when you sign one of those contracts and your employee's injured by a third party, let's say the owners, in this case, the owner's unsafe golf cart operator. the claim goes back to the general liability insurance. So you hit with a big workers' comp claim, plus your general liability insurance is going to go up. It was really a horrible situation. So they wrote a long letter explaining what happened, and fortunately they were able to get renewed because it really wasn't their fault. You know, there's lots of cases where I'm told, you know, the employee, we told the employee over and over and over and over again not to do this. And you know what? He or she was at a site and they did it, and the employee got injured. Well, you know what? Write that up. And if someone deviated from your safety practices, your code of safe practices, give them a disciplinary memo. The insurance company and also OSHA, if it's reported to OSHA, if it's a bad enough injury and reported to OSHA by the emergency medical technicians, just explain it to them as well. So what I'd like to do now is to take any questions, and Jessica has been kind enough to read them to me. And so if you have any questions or any concerns, and again, if you have any questions or you have a quick question, a simple matter, please email me, Bob, BOBTUMAN, one word, @gmail.com. And thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bob, for your presentation. Again, as Bob said, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box. The chat icon is located at the top right-hand side of your screen. Right now, I do not have any questions, so we'll give everybody just a couple of minutes while we are waiting for that. I do want to let you know that this presentation is available or will be available on the ASA online website at the end of the day today. So if you would like to reference it, you can access it there. And if anybody does not have questions, we will go ahead and conclude for today. Again, thank you, Bob, for your presentation, and thank you all.
And thank you.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.